Secrets, lies, and a single sheet of paper that could change everything. Rebecca was 5 months pregnant when she discovered her husband's darkest betrayal, a mistress, tucked away in a secret apartment, a promise of the family home gifted to another woman. Standing in front of that very house, clutching the deed, Rebecca realized she held all the power. Friends had warned her, family had whispered, but no one could have guessed the shocking turn of events about to unfold. If you're ready for deception, heartbreak, and the sweetest revenge, stay right here. This story will grip your heart and never let go. Rebecca Martin was raised on the outskirts of Bloomington, Indiana, a quiet town where everyone knew each other's names and personal business. Her father, Carl Martin, worked in construction, and her mother, Julia Martin, was a school librarian who valued discipline and kindness. From an early age, Rebecca was known for her strong sense of justice. She wouldn't hesitate to defend a friend from bullies on the playground or challenge a teacher if she felt something was unfair. When Rebecca turned 20, she moved to Indianapolis for college, studying business administration at Howard and Kingsley University. The hustle of a bigger city thrilled her. It was at a crowded campus cafeteria where she met Adrian Carter, a marketing major who was 2 years her senior. Adrian had confidence that was nearly magnetic. He navigated conversations like a seasoned politician, sweet-talking professors, and fellow students alike. Rebecca, always prepared to see the good in people, found him both charming and sharp-minded. Their romance began the way young love often does: spontaneous dinner dates, late-night phone calls, and playful text banter that stretched into the early morning hours. Rebecca's friends adored Adrian, praising him for his wit and ambition. Adrian showered her with compliments, telling her she was unlike any woman he'd ever met. By the time they both graduated, Adrian and Rebecca were undeniably inseparable. They seemed like the perfect match, one bounding forward with unstoppable drive, the other anchored in loyalty and moral fortitude. But even in those halcyon days, there were signs, small cracks, that hinted something deeper lurked behind Adrian's sunny smile. There was the time Rebecca found a suspicious text on his phone from a female co-worker. He brushed it off as harmless flirting. Another time, he cancelled weekend plans at the last minute, claiming an urgent assignment at work only for her to spot him at a bar with a group of unknown friends. Still, Rebecca dismissed these red flags. She reasoned that every relationship had bumps, especially when two ambitious people were charting career paths in the big city. Eventually, Adrian landed a promising job at an advertising firm, and Rebecca joined her father's construction business with dreams of growing it into a larger enterprise. They got married in a modest ceremony at the Martin family's church, close friends, immediate family, and simple decorations. The wedding might not have been extravagant, but it was heartfelt. Standing at the altar, Rebecca believed in the vows they exchanged with every fiber of her being. Adrian seemed equally smitten that day, gazing into her eyes as if she were his entire world. Yet, as it often does, real life started chipping away at their bond. Adrian's work demanded frequent socializing with clients, late nights, and networking events. Meanwhile, Rebecca was determined to prove herself in a field typically dominated by men. Even then, they supported each other's ambitions. They decided to buy a house in a leafy suburb of Indianapolis on Elmwood Avenue, spacious enough for the children they planned to have and close enough to downtown so Adrian's commute wasn't an ordeal. That house, ironically, would become the epicenter of a betrayal no one saw coming. The house on Elmwood Avenue was everything Rebecca dreamed it would be: a sturdy 2-story brick home with a wraparound porch, a long driveway, and a backyard large enough for barbecues and children's laughter. Carl Martin, ever the proud father, pitched in to help renovate, installing new cabinets, repainting walls, and refinishing the hardwood floors. Adrian contributed by picking out high-tech gadgets and modern furniture, ensuring the place exuded subtle luxury. At first, the Carters' life in that home seemed idyllic. Weekends were filled with quiet breakfasts in the sunlit kitchen, and evenings concluded with them cuddled on the couch, brainstorming future business ventures or planning vacations. They were building a life together brick by brick, or so Rebecca believed. But about 2 years into their marriage, Adrian began to change. Subtly at first. He started coming home later, missing family dinners, insisting he needed space to recharge because his job was extremely demanding. Rebecca understood. Pressure too. Carl's company was expanding and she was required to travel to new sites across the region. She attributed Adrian's distance to stress and tried to be supportive, offering him space but also gentle encouragement to open up about his worries. One August evening, after yet another missed dinner, Rebecca confronted him. She had cooked his favorite meal, homemade lasagna, and waited for hours. He walked in around 10 p.m., reeking of whiskey and cigarette smoke. Instead of apologizing, he flopped onto the couch, stared at her with bloodshot eyes, and declared, "I had to be with clients. We closed a $1 million campaign." His voice was dismissive, almost irritated. Alarmed at his tone, she pressed, "But why didn't you text me?" "I've been worried." He shrugged, turning away. "I'm doing this for us, Becky. Can't you understand that in that moment the closeness they once shared felt distant, as though someone had erected an invisible wall between them?" Uncomfortable, worried, and a little angry, Rebecca backed off. She slept in the guest room that night, thinking that some space might calm both of them. Neither of them spoke of the incident in the days that followed, but a quiet tension took root. Despite these disconcerting shifts in Adrian's behavior, Rebecca stayed. She believed in marriage vows, believed that the man she married was still somewhere in there, buried beneath stress and ambition. She never imagined that behind her back, Adrian was kindling a fire with another woman, one that would threaten the very foundation of their life. Elena Thompson was younger than Rebecca by a few years. She was a fledgling graphic designer who joined Adrian's advertising firm 6 months earlier. Tall, with dark hair styled in a chic bob, she possessed the confidence of someone used to turning heads. Rumor had it she grew up in a wealthy family in Chicago, though no one at the firm knew much about her personal life. She'd appear at office gatherings in designer dresses and million-watt smiles, mesmerizing men and women alike with her casual charm and artistic flair. For Adrian, Elena was a temptation too alluring to resist. She laughed at his jokes, praised his marketing brilliance, and flaunted her artistic talents in a way that made him feel like a visionary. Over weeks of late-night project sessions and frequent after-work drinks, a spark ignited between them. Elena found Adrian captivating. He was older, more experienced, with a steady financial footing that her freelance gigs had never provided. Adrian, restless in his marriage, began to see Elena as a refreshing alternative to the responsibilities and constraints at home. Their affair started in small ways, subtle touches, longing glances, text messages that escalated from purely professional to undeniably intimate. Elena liked to say, "I see the real you," a phrase that became a seductive promise Adrian couldn't ignore. He began making excuses for not coming home, something that became easier once Rebecca started traveling more for her father's company. Soon, he was practically living a double life, the successful ad man at home with a devoted wife and the charming boyfriend, to a bright young designer in a trendy downtown loft. Rebecca started noticing inconsistencies in Adrian's stories. He'd claimed to be at a company retreat in Cincinnati, but a co-worker mentioned to her in passing that the retreat had been cancelled. He'd talk about a new campaign that required extended hours, but office staff said the project was on hiatus. While these lies troubled her, her family and best friend Andrea Collins urged her not to jump to conclusions. "Maybe it's just stress," Andrea repeated, though a shadow of doubt crossed her face too. What nobody suspected was how far Adrian and Elena's bond had progressed, and the grand promise Adrian would eventually make to keep Elena's affection. One crisp October afternoon, Rebecca found herself at the office of attorney James Carter, Adrian's cousin. The visit was supposed to be about updating insurance information for the house, something Rebecca insisted on before her upcoming business trip. She happened to mention she wanted to be sure that both their names were correctly on the deed, given her father's significant contribution to the down payment. James looked perplexed, checking the records. He confirmed that indeed, both Adrian and Rebecca were listed as co-owners. "No changes have been made," he said, matter-of-factly. "Why did Adrian say something about that? No, Rebecca stammered. I just wanted to be sure everything was in order." His questioning gaze made her uneasy, but she brushed it off as a routine check. Yet that moment lingered in her mind. Why had she asked about changes? She wasn't sure. Something about Adrian's behavior made her uncertain of everything she thought she knew. That evening, Rebecca decided to look through their financial statements. She noticed unusual withdrawals, thousands of dollars gone, with cryptic notations about consulting fees. As she dug deeper, she found monthly payments to an apartment complex in downtown Indianapolis, far from their suburb. Suspicion flared in her mind, but her heart clung to a desperate hope that there was a simple explanation. It was the first time she realized she needed tangible proof of what was really going on. She started collecting bits of evidence: dates Adrian claimed to be out of town, questionable receipts for late-night dinners, and references to unknown individuals in text messages. Her initial impulse was to confront Adrian immediately, but she hesitated. She'd grown up believing in giving people the benefit of the doubt. Could she have gotten it all wrong? Meanwhile, Adrian was oblivious to her scrutiny. He continued to juggle his time between wife and mistress. Eleanor, impatient with late-night trysts and secret rendezvous, demanded something more permanent. "I'm tired of being just the other woman," she confessed one night, tears glistening in her eyes. "Prove to me I'm more than that." And so, in a rash moment fueled by infatuation and desperation, Adrian promised Elena something colossal. "I'll give you the house. Rebecca doesn't need to know. We can change the deed. It's basically mine anyway," he boasted, ignoring the financial reality and Rebecca's half-ownership. For Elena, such a declaration was intoxicating proof of his commitment. For Adrian, it was the first step onto a treacherous path he had no idea how to navigate. While Adrian's betrayal brewed in secrecy, Rebecca was dealt another life-changing surprise. She discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected something was off for a while: fatigue, mild nausea, and a heightened emotional sensitivity that she blamed on stress. A quick drugstore test confirmed her suspicions. Staring at the pink lines, Rebecca felt an overwhelming blend of joy and terror. The child she had dreamed of for so long was finally coming. But her marriage was faltering, riddled with late-night absences and cryptic lies. In a daze, she wandered into the living room, test in hand. She pictured the perfect announcement scenario she'd once envisioned: a romantic dinner, soft music, perhaps a sweet note pinned to Adrian's favorite dessert. Instead, she found the couch empty, the clock approaching midnight, and no text or call from Adrian to explain his absence. She sat there, tears welling in her eyes, clutching the test that symbolized both hope and heartbreak. 3 hours later, Adrian stumbled in half-drunk, reeking of whiskey and overpriced cologne. Rebecca was still waiting the pregnancy test, now hidden away. She watched him with a wary gaze. Her first instinct was to confront him, demand to know where he'd been, why he smelled like another woman's perfume. Yet something stopped her. Fear, perhaps. Fear that if she unleashed all her suspicions now, she'd discover truths too painful to bear. Fear, too, of what it would mean for her unborn child if her marriage crumbled. So she let the moment pass. She helped Adrian remove his shoes, pulled a blanket over him on the couch, and retreated to bed, alone, her mind spinning with conflicting emotions. A baby was on the way. She was determined to protect this child, to give them a stable life. But how could she do that when her husband seemed to be slipping further into secrecy and deception? Finding herself in emotional turmoil, Rebecca did what she often did when she needed clarity. She drove back to Bloomington to see her parents. Carl and Julia sensed something was wrong the moment she stepped into the house. She looked pale, her eyes hollow from nights spent crying. They urged her to spill everything, and she did minus her suspicions of Adrian's infidelity. Instead, she spoke about his late nights, his erratic behavior, and the unusual financial statements. Carl, ever the protective father, bristled. "You're pregnant, and he's acting like this," he demanded. But Julia reminded him gently that they didn't know the whole story. Stress at Adrian's job could be a factor. They pledged their support no matter what. That evening, Rebecca called her best friend, Andrea Collins. Andrea, an investigative journalist by trade, had always been a pillar of strength and a fountain of practical solutions. When Rebecca mentioned the suspicious transactions and the downtown apartment, Andrea's tone grew serious. "You need to find out who lives there. Come on. We both know how to dig up property records. Let's do this the right way." Rebecca hesitated. Doing so would mark a point of no return. But her commitment to truth and her newly discovered pregnancy pushed her forward. Within a few days, with Andrea's help, she uncovered that the apartment was leased under a shell account Adrian had set up. Further digging revealed a pattern of similar consulting fee withdrawals that matched monthly rent payments. It was undeniable proof that Adrian was keeping a secret space in the city. The shock rippled through her entire being. She felt betrayed, furious, and heartbroken all at once. Still, she wasn't ready to confront him without seeing this apartment for herself. What if it was just some meeting space for his business deals? Her conscience told her to give him a chance to explain, but her gut warned that nothing he could say would justify such deception. That weekend, while Adrian was away at one of his supposed client getaways, Rebecca and Andrea drove to the downtown complex, hearts pounding in unison. They had no plan beyond seeing who might open that apartment door. If it was indeed a mistress, the truth would be laid bare. If no one answered, they'd have only more questions. But Rebecca knew she had to knock. Rebecca's hands trembled as she stood outside apartment number 410 at the Carteron Lofts. Andrea offered to knock on the door, but Rebecca insisted on doing it herself. She took a breath, rapped 3 times, and waited. The hallway lights flickered ominously, underscoring the tension. When the door opened, a young woman with dark hair and striking features peered out. She wore a casual silk robe, clearly not expecting visitors. For a moment, they stared at each other, speechless. Then Rebecca broke the silence. "Is Adrian Carter here?" Elena Thompson, though Rebecca didn't know her name yet, narrowed her eyes. "Who wants to know, Rebecca?" Drew a shaky breath. "His wife." Elena's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then settled into something that looked like subtle panic. She held the door only slightly ajar, but it was enough for Rebecca to glimpse the interior men's shoes near the entrance, a half-filled wine glass, on the coffee table scattered design sketches. A laptop was open, paused on a video call screen that read, "Adrian Carter." Andrea cleared her throat, stepping forward. "So it's true. You are the other woman." Eleanor's defenses kicked in. "He told me," he said, she stammered before gathering her composure. "We're in a committed relationship. He said the marriage was over, that you two were going through a divorce." Rebecca felt a wave of nausea. Her suspicion was now an irrefutable fact. Adrian had lied. Not just a little fib, but a massive deception that had led another woman to believe she was his real partner. The world spun around her. Andrea placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Committed relationship," Rebecca repeated softly, her voice trembling. "You think you can just break up a marriage like that?" Elena's eyes flickered with guilt, but also anger. "He promised me everything," she said. "He promised me this apartment, the house in Elmwood, even said he'd pay off my car loan. He told me you didn't want him anymore." A strangled laugh escaped from Andrea. He's been living with my friend, his pregnant wife, this entire time." Elena's mouth fell open. "Pregnant? That's a lie. He never said anything about a baby." Rebecca staggered back, swallowing her tears. Without another word, she turned away and walked briskly back to the elevator. Andrea followed, throwing one last glare at Elena before the door closed. Inside the elevator, Rebecca's composure gave way to sobs that echoed off the steel walls. Andrea, tears glistening in her own eyes, wrapped her arms around her friend in a fierce hug. They drove home in silence, the city lights blurring, as tears streamed down Rebecca's face. That night, she barely slept, cradling her belly while her mind raced with plans, regrets, and heartbreak. She didn't want this child, born into a broken family. But what choice did she have now? 2 days passed before Adrian returned from his so-called client getaway. Rebecca had managed to keep her emotions under control, though she felt a storm brewing inside her. She wanted to confront him the moment he walked in, but her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Stay calm, collect the facts, handle this with a cool head." When Adrian finally strode through the front door, luggage in hand, Rebecca noticed how easily he masked his guilt. He greeted her with a forced smile, tried to kiss her cheek, but she pulled away. "We need to talk," she said, her tone flat. Adrian set down his suitcase, scanning her face. "Sure. Let me grab a shower first." "No," she interrupted. "Now." They went into the living room. Rebecca drew in a long breath. "I know about the downtown apartment. I've met the woman, Elena Thompson. She told me everything." Adrian's face lost its color. For a moment, he looked like a cornered animal, searching for an escape. Then came the flurry of excuses. "It's not what you think. I was just helping her with some bills. She's an employee in need." "I never meant stop lying," Rebecca said, her voice dangerously calm. "I've seen the apartment. I've talked to Elena. She said you promised her the house. Our house." He looked as though he might faint. His mouth opened and closed, words failing him. Then a surge of anger replaced his panic. "Do you have any idea how stressful my job is? I just needed an escape. She listened to me. She admired me. Something you stopped doing long ago." Rebecca shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "I've done nothing but support you. I changed my entire life to be with you." I had your back every step of the way. And now, she paused, taking a trembling breath. I'm pregnant, Adrian. His eyes widened, and for a second genuine shock, or maybe guilt, flickered across his face. Pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? She laughed bitterly. Because you were too busy with your mistress to notice anything. A suffocating silence settled over them. Finally, Adrian mumbled, You don't understand. I never thought you'd find out. Rebecca cut him off, rage exploding. You never thought, that's the point. You didn't think about me or our child. You were so selfish, you risked everything we built for a fling. His voice rose, desperation creeping in. She's more than a fling. I love her. I love you too, but it's complicated. Rebecca felt her stomach churn at the audacity. Stop. I don't want to hear about your love for anyone. You promised her our house, Adrian. That's unforgivable. He sank into the couch, burying his face in his hands. I messed up. I'll fix it. Rebecca looked at him, a coldness settling in her chest. She was done. There was no saving this. There is no fixing this, she said softly. Get out. The day after the confrontation, Rebecca contacted James Carter again, explaining the situation in tears. James, having heard rumors, but never receiving full confirmation, was stunned. He offered to represent her interests pro bono, wanting to distance himself from his cousin's transgressions. Their biggest concern was the house on Elmwood Avenue. Adrian's brazen promise to Elena might have no legal standing after all the deed was jointly held by Adrian and Rebecca. But a cunning move from Adrian could complicate the matter. James advised that they take immediate steps to secure full ownership in a way that protected Rebecca and her unborn child. The tricky part was that the house was purchased jointly and the law wouldn't simply hand it to Rebecca without some negotiation or legal basis. However, there was one advantage: Carl Martin's substantial financial contribution and the documented arrangement that in the event of marital misconduct, Rebecca could assume sole possession. This was something Carl insisted on including at the time of purchase, foreseeing that marital strife could affect property ownership. Adrian had naively signed those papers, likely too distracted by excitement over the new home to read the fine print carefully. With James's help, Rebecca initiated a swift legal process. She filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity and presented the evidence of Adrian's affair, including financial statements showing he had used marital assets to maintain his mistress's lifestyle. The final stroke was the marital misconduct clause that could grant her sole ownership of the property if proven. James was confident they had a strong case. Adrian, blindsided by Rebecca's legal blitz, attempted a few half-hearted reconciliations. He sent text messages, leaving voicemails late at night, apologizing and claiming he wanted to make things right. But his pleas rang hollow. Rebecca had seen the truth too clearly. Elena, meanwhile, discovered the precariousness of her position. The illusions Adrian had spun, promising her a life of comfort, property in her name, were unraveling like cheap thread. She didn't know what to believe anymore, and for the first time, she questioned whether Adrian had used her just as he'd used so many others before. The legal proceedings started off tensely. During the preliminary hearings, Adrian's lawyer attempted to argue that the house was equal property and that no formal transfer could happen without both parties' agreement. But James Carter calmly presented the ironclad clause, specifying that in cases of marital infidelity, the innocent spouse, Rebecca, had the right to assume full ownership if certain conditions were met. Adrian tried to protest that emotional neglect and marital breakdown had led him astray. He accused Rebecca of being unsupportive, too busy with her father's company, and failing to meet his emotional needs. Rebecca stayed composed on the stand, recounting the nights he never came home, the discovery of his mistress, and the financial documents proving Adrian used marital funds to keep Elena housed in the city. Compounding Adrian's problems was the revelation that Elena was willing to testify if subpoenaed. Though reluctant at first, she eventually cooperated, especially after realizing she had no legal right to the promised property. She told the court how Adrian assured her he controlled the house and that Rebecca was out of the picture. The judge, an older woman named Sandra Brightwell, listened carefully to both sides. After reviewing the prenuptial and purchase documents plus the evidence of Adrian's affair, Judge Brightwell gave a pointed look to Adrian. "You entered this contract willingly, Mr. Carter, and your extramarital actions have violated it," she stated. "Mrs. Carter is entitled to full ownership of the property given the terms we have before us." Adrian's face went pale. He seemed unable to comprehend that his impulsive promise to Elena, his deception, and his blatant betrayal had led him to lose not just his marriage, but also the cherished house he once boasted about. Meanwhile, Rebecca maintained a calm exterior, though inside her heart was pounding with a mix of relief and sorrow. The house was hers, entirely hers, but at a grave emotional cost. Armed with the legal documents confirming her sole ownership, Rebecca wasted no time evicting Adrian. He had already moved out weeks ago, crashing at a friend's place, and sometimes at Elena's apartment. However, in a moment of twisted gall, Adrian tried to reason with Rebecca to let him stay in the guest room, just until he found his own place. She refused outright, handing him an official eviction notice. With the child due in a few months, the last thing she needed was the father's toxic presence lingering in her new sanctuary. But the real shock came when Elena approached Rebecca unannounced at the construction office. Andrea, who happened to be there for moral support, tensed up instantly when she saw the young mistress stride in, face flushed with worry. "What do you want?" Andrea demanded. Elena lifted her hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to make trouble. I want to apologize to Rebecca." Rebecca's expression was unreadable. She studied Elena for a moment, then nodded for her to continue. "I didn't know you were pregnant," Elena said, voice trembling. "Adrian lied about so many things. I'm sorry for my part in hurting you. I believed him when he said you two were practically separated." A bitter laugh escaped from Andrea, but Rebecca silenced her with a glance. Turning back to Elena, she replied, "I appreciate the apology, but that doesn't undo the damage." Elena nodded, tears brimming. "I know. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I'm leaving the firm. I can't stay there after everything." In that moment, Rebecca saw a sliver of a woman who was perhaps just as deceived. She let out a shaky breath. "Take care of yourself, Eleanor. I hope you find a better path." Elena left quietly, shoulders sagging under the weight of regret. Andrea watched her go, relief washing over her. "At least she admitted her wrongdoing," she murmured. Rebecca only nodded, focusing on the bigger priority, the baby that would arrive soon, and her new life that needed rebuilding from the ashes. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Rebecca moved forward with the divorce proceedings, finalizing the settlement that granted her sole ownership of the Elmwood Avenue house. Adrian, cornered by legal fees and a tarnished reputation at work, faced a series of humiliations. His boss, who initially admired his charisma, found out about the scandal and cut Adrian from important accounts. Clients questioned his trustworthiness, and in the competitive world of advertising, that kind of doubt was a career killer. Meanwhile, Rebecca transformed the house into a cozy haven for her soon-to-arrive child. Carl and Julia dropped by almost daily, helping paint the nursery, a soft lavender, and assembling the crib. Andrea put together a baby shower, inviting close friends who rallied around Rebecca with well wishes and baby gifts. Despite the heartbreak, love and support poured in from her family and friends. It was enough to remind her that life goes on even after the deepest betrayals. One evening, as the setting sun cast golden light across the living room, Rebecca sat in a comfortable chair, rubbing her swollen belly and contemplating the future. This house had once felt like a symbol of a bright marital beginning. Now it stood as a monument to her resilience. When she felt the baby kick, a wave of hope surged inside her. She whispered softly to her unborn child, "We've got this. No matter how hard it gets, we'll stand tall." She realized that while Adrian's betrayal had shaken her world, it hadn't destroyed her spirit. If anything, it revealed strengths she never knew she possessed. A week before her due date, Rebecca answered a knock at her door, heart pounding, as she peered through the window. Standing on the porch was Adrian himself, looking disheveled and haunted by regret. She hesitated, then opened the door just enough to peer out. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone guarded. He exhaled, heavily, eyes flicking to her round belly. "I just want to talk." She considered shutting the door in his face, but something in his voice, a hint of genuine remorse, made her pause. She gestured for him to follow her to the porch swing, refusing to let him set foot inside the house he'd lost the right to. They sat in awkward silence for a few moments. Adrian cleared his throat. "How are you feeling?" Rebecca ran a hand over her belly, protective. "As well as can be expected." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry, Becky. I know I can never fix what I did. I want to be a part of the baby's life." She studied him, recalling the nights she spent sobbing alone, wondering how he could leave her for Elena. "You lost the right to dictate how things go when you decided to cheat," she said, a tinge of anger creeping into her voice. "But you are the baby's father. My child deserves to know who you are. We'll need to figure out co-parenting arrangements. That's all I can offer." Adrian's shoulders sagged with relief. "I understand. I won't try to push anything more. I just want to be there for our child, and if there's anything you need, financial support, medical expenses, I'll do it." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "I'll have my lawyer talk to your lawyer. This is bigger than you and me." He nodded, standing up awkwardly. His eyes scanned the porch, the yard, the house he once called home, a flicker of longing in them. "You look good," by the way, he managed, voice cracking. She offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you. Goodbye, Adrian." Without another word, he walked down the steps and drove off. Rebecca watched until the car disappeared, then patted her belly softly. "He doesn't deserve us," she whispered. "But we'll be fair." Rebecca went into labor on a sunny Saturday morning. Carl and Julia rushed her to the hospital, while Andrea frantically gathered Rebecca's overnight bag. The contractions were fierce and unrelenting, but amidst the pain, Rebecca felt an unshakable courage. She was about to meet the child who had become her beacon of hope. Over the next 12 hours, she endured the grueling process of labor. At one point, through ragged breaths, she noticed Adrian standing in the hospital hallway, anxiety etched into his face. James Carter must have informed him of her labor, she thought. He paced back and forth, clearly unsure if he was welcome. Carl glared at him from across the corridor, protective as ever. Rebecca's screams echoed down the hallway, and finally, after a final push, the baby's cries rang out, a healthy baby girl. Tears streamed down Rebecca's cheeks as the nurse placed the tiny bundle in her arms. She named her Olivia Grace Carter, determined to keep the father's surname for now, if only to avoid legal complications. The moment she looked into Olivia's bright eyes, she forgot every pain, every heartbreak. This was love, pure and untainted. An hour later, when the dust settled and the room cleared, Adrian peeked in, tentatively. Rebecca, exhausted but glowing, nodded to the nurse. She allowed him a moment with his daughter. He inched forward, tears welling in his eyes as he gently stroked Olivia's cheek. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Thank you." Rebecca nodded, her voice soft. "We'll discuss visitation, but please keep it peaceful for her sake." Adrian agreed, stepping back, reluctantly. Watching him leave, Rebecca felt a tinge of sadness for what they once had, but she also felt a new, unbreakable resolve. Her life belonged to her, and now to Olivia. That gave her all the motivation she needed to forge a new path, free from deceit. As the weeks turned into months, Rebecca adapted to motherhood with unwavering determination. Olivia thrived, surrounded by the love of her mother-grandparents and Auntie Andrea. Even James Carter became a frequent visitor, doting on his niece and offering legal advice whenever new issues surfaced. Adrian had supervised visitation rights, but his time with Olivia was sporadic at best. He claimed work emergencies or scheduling conflicts. More than once, Rebecca found herself alone in the living room, Olivia cooing in her arms, as Adrian texted last-minute cancellations. It quickly became apparent that fatherhood was not going to magically transform him into a responsible, reliable figure in their daughter's life. Then came news that Elena Thompson had left town, heading back to Chicago to start over. Word got around that she'd parted ways with Adrian for good. The scandal at the ad firm had tarnished her reputation as well, but she was talented enough to find freelance work back home. Some part of Rebecca felt relieved for Elena. She was young. She had time to turn her life around. Meanwhile, Carl Martin surprised Rebecca by offering her a co-ownership stake in his construction company. "You've always worked hard, and you deserve it," he said, hugging her tight. "Use the experience to build something for you and Olivia." Emboldened by motherhood and her father's faith in her abilities, Rebecca leapt into the opportunity. She rebranded the company, added new services, and even started a charitable program that refurbished homes for veterans. It was her way of channeling pain into productivity, her heartbreak into hope. But the biggest twist came when a local news outlet got wind of the entire saga, the city's rising advertising star who promised his family home to his mistress only to lose it all in court. A friend of Andrea's pitched the story as a cautionary tale of betrayal, perseverance, and women's empowerment. They interviewed Rebecca, whose father was well known in construction, and the piece went viral. Her transformation from scorned wife to confident business owner captured the public's imagination. Suddenly, she was receiving invitations to speak at women's empowerment panels, to share her story of resilience and triumph. The swirl of publicity was dizzying, but it also solidified one thing: Rebecca's darkest hour had given birth to her brightest destiny. No longer the naive college girl or the trusting wife, she emerged as a fierce entrepreneur and a devoted mother. And through it all, the house on Elmwood Avenue stood as a testament to what she had overcome. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Adrian, emboldened by a few drinks, decided to barge into the Elmwood house. He parked haphazardly, marched up the porch steps, and hammered on the door. Cradling Olivia in her arms, Rebecca cautiously answered. The moment she saw his glassy eyes, she knew trouble was brewing. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice firm. He staggered slightly, eyes filled with a storm of emotions. "I want to see my daughter," he slurred. "And I have a right to this house too. We built it together." Rebecca's jaw tightened. She handed Olivia to Andrea, who hovered protectively nearby. Then she reached into a folder on a nearby table and pulled out the official deed, displaying her sole ownership, stamped and signed by the court. "You see this?" she said, voice unwavering. "This is the deed to the house. My house. You lost all rights when you cheated. Now leave." Adrian's gaze darted from the legal document to Rebecca's eyes. For a moment, he seemed to sober up. He stepped back, a hollow laugh escaping him. The final blow had landed. No more illusions, no more manipulations. In that instant, reality settled over him like a heavy fog. Without further protest, he turned and stumbled down the porch steps. Rebecca shut the door, leaning against it, heart pounding. Across the room, Andrea cradled Olivia. Their eyes met in shared relief. It was done. It was finally, unequivocally done. In the months that followed, Rebecca focused on raising Olivia and expanding her father's company, now partly her own. She rarely heard from Adrian, except for the occasional text about child support or scheduling visits he seldom kept. Life was simpler without the constant churn of betrayal. The house on Elmwood Avenue felt lighter, more welcoming, as if it too had shed the weight of Adrian's deceit. And yet a part of her still wrestled with forgiveness. Not for Adrian's sake, he'd lost that privilege, but for her own. She attended therapy sessions to help process the trauma. She learned that holding on to anger was like clinging to a burning coal. It hurt her more than anyone else. One chilly December evening, as she rocked Olivia to sleep in the nursery, she whispered, "I forgive him. Not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace." She repeated it, letting the words wash over her tears, slipping down her cheeks, in a gentle release of old pain. That night, she slept better than she had in ages. In the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon, mother and child rested in peaceful slumber. With the divorce final and the drama mostly behind her, Rebecca found new joy in hosting gatherings at the Elmwood house. Andrea would come by with groceries for potluck dinners, and Carl and Julia frequently stopped in doting on their granddaughter with a grandparent's unconditional love. Laughter filled the walls once tainted by secrets. Every so often, Rebecca would catch a glimpse of the ring she used to wear on her left hand, tucked away in a jewelry box. She debated what to do with it, pawn it, melt it, throw it in the trash, but eventually she decided to keep it as a reminder of lessons learned. Never ignore the little red flags, always trust her intuition, and most importantly, never lose herself trying to please another. The official launch of Martin Carter Construction, rebranded and co-owned by father and daughter, was a triumph. They held a grand opening event, complete with a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Dozens of local business owners, community leaders, and old friends of Carl's attended. Rebecca stood on a small podium, wearing a confident smile, Olivia clapping happily in her arms. She thanked everyone for their support, turning a personal tragedy into a message of hope. "We can't always choose the challenges life gives us," she said, voice clear and resonant, "but we can choose how we rise to meet them." Applause thundered across the gathering. As she stepped down, Andrea gave her a high five, beaming. "You did it, girl, and it's only the beginning." A year passed. Olivia took her first steps wobbly and uncertain across the living room floor. Rebecca, Carl, and Julia cheered, tears of joy in their eyes. The messy tapestry of the past began to fade into memory. The once gaping wound of betrayal had gradually healed leaving a scar that reminded Rebecca of her inner strength. She went on a few dates here and there, hesitant about jumping into another serious relationship. While she enjoyed the companionship, her priority was Olivia's well-being and the continued growth of Martin Carter Construction. Sometimes she wondered if she was capable of trusting again, but her therapist and her own intuition reassured her healing wasn't a sprint. It was a journey. Every so often she'd hear news about Adrian, mostly rumors. He left the ad firm, hopped between lesser agencies, and was rumored to have an on-and-off fling with someone else. He occasionally reached out to see Olivia, but his visits remained inconsistent. Rebecca set firm boundaries, refusing to let him disrupt the safe environment she had created for their daughter. He provided financial support under court order, but fatherhood clearly wasn't his forte. Yet in the quiet nights when Olivia slept soundly, Rebecca sometimes gazed at old photos from happier times. She allowed herself a twinge of sadness for what could have been. But she never lingered on the regret too long. Life, she realized, moves forward, whether we want it to or not, and so must she. One sunny afternoon, Rebecca found herself sipping iced tea on the porch, watching Olivia play with colorful blocks on the lawn. The same porch where Adrian once tried to reassert his non-existent claim over the house. The air was crisp leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. A sense of gratitude settled over her. She had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation. Yet here she stood, thriving, successful, and blessed with a beautiful daughter. That house which Adrian had so arrogantly promised to another woman now belonged to Rebecca alone, both legally and emotionally. It was her home, a place of warmth and second chances. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, Andrea arrived, carrying a fresh bouquet of wildflowers. "For the hardest working woman I know," she teased, setting the flowers on the porch table. Rebecca smiled. "Thanks, Andrea." Her friend plopped down on the adjacent chair, gazing at Olivia. "You ever regret not giving Adrian another chance?" Without hesitation, Rebecca shook her head. "No, he had plenty of chances. I finally learned that some people won't change until life forces them. And even then, it might be too late." Andrea nodded in agreement, reaching out to squeeze Rebecca's hand. "Proud of you, Becky." They sat in companionable silence, watching the golden hour light bathe the yard in warmth. Rebecca's phone buzzed a message notification. She glanced at it briefly, a client requesting a new project estimate. She grinned, setting the phone aside for now. Work could wait until after she soaked up this peaceful moment with her best friend and her child. In the hush that followed, she listened to Olivia's playful giggles, the soft rustle of the breeze, and felt the steady rhythm of her own heart. It beat with a profound sense of contentment. She'd come a long way from that frightened pregnant wife left in the shadows of deceit. Now she was a woman in full command of her destiny. Looking back on her journey, Rebecca acknowledged how crucial each step was in shaping her future. She'd learned to stand up for herself, to rely on the unwavering support of true friends and family, and to never let her worth be defined by someone else's inability to remain faithful. She decided to pen a short journal intended for Olivia when she was older. In neat handwriting, she documented the struggles, the heartbreak, and the ultimate triumph. She wrote how sometimes the darkest moments can unveil the brightest strengths, how a single piece of paper, the deed in her hand, symbolized more than property. It represented the end of an old life and the dawn of a new one. With each page, she poured wisdom, warning her daughter about red flags in relationships, but also encouraging her to keep an open heart. She concluded with a promise, "I will always choose what's best for you and me, even if it's the hardest thing I've ever done." Because true love starts with loving oneself. She sealed the journal in a safe place, making a mental note to give it to Olivia on her 18th birthday. Perhaps by then the details of this saga would feel like ancient history, but the lessons she hoped would remain as timeless as ever. A few days after completing her journal entry, Rebecca stood in front of a modest crowd at a local women's shelter. She'd been invited to speak about resilience and owning one's power. With Olivia at home, with Grandma Julia, Rebecca addressed the audience. "I was once someone who believed wholeheartedly in someone who didn't deserve my trust. I lost my sense of self-worth in the process, but life taught me that heartbreak can be transformed into a stepping stone if we let it. No one can take away your dignity or your future unless you give them that power. Remember, you are stronger than you know." The applause was thunderous. After the talk, a few women approached, some teary-eyed, thanking her for sharing such a personal story. One young mother confided that she was going through a similar situation, abandoned by a cheating partner while pregnant. Hearing Rebecca's journey gave her hope. That night, as she drove back to Elmwood Avenue, she felt a sense of fulfillment. She realized her story wasn't just her own. It resonated with others who had faced betrayal and wondered if they could ever stand again. Her victory wasn't just the house or the successful business, it was discovering that she could transform pain into purpose. 5 years later, the house on Elmwood Avenue was filled with echoes of a vibrant life. Olivia, now a spirited child with curly hair and an infectious laugh, darted through the living room, playing hide-and-seek with Grandpa Carl. Construction projects for Martin Carter soared, and Rebecca had grown into a well-regarded figure in the community. She occasionally heard about Adrian bits and pieces. He'd moved to another state, remarried, perhaps. Rebecca felt no bitterness about it anymore. She only prayed he'd be a better partner to his new spouse than he had been to her. Life had its way of teaching lessons. Rebecca also began dating again with measured caution. She enjoyed companionship, but made it clear she had zero tolerance for dishonesty. If someone showed signs of duplicity, she'd walk away without hesitation. She refused to let the ghosts of her past overshadow the possibilities of her future. The real treasure was the unbreakable bond she shared with Olivia. Each night, she tucked her daughter in with a story, sometimes reading from fairy tales, other times recounting comedic anecdotes from their daily adventures. Their home was a safe haven brimming with unconditional love, and that Rebecca believed was the greatest victory of all. One breezy summer evening, the neighbors gathered for a barbecue in Rebecca's backyard. Andrea showed up with her new fiancé, and James Carter came with a date, both couples beaming. Carl manned the grill flipping burgers with paternal pride, while Julia passed around potato salad. Kids ran amok, laughter filling the air. The Elmwood Avenue house resonated with joy, a far cry from the tense silence of the past. As twilight descended and string lights glowed overhead, the group sat around a makeshift fire pit. Someone started telling ghost stories, and giggles mixed with mock terror. Rebecca gazed around at the familiar faces, each person who had stood by her when her world nearly collapsed. She realized that the house, once overshadowed by Adrian's deceit, was now redeemed by countless acts of love and support. Toward the end of the evening, Andrea proposed a toast. Everyone raised their cups. To Rebecca, Andrea began, "For reminding us that sometimes the most devastating storms yield the most beautiful rainbows, and to never losing sight of who we are, no matter what tries to break us. Tears shimmered in Rebecca's eyes as she lifted her cup. And to all of you, my family, my friends, thank you for believing in me even when I struggled to believe in myself. They clinked cups in the golden glow of the firelight, sealed by friendship, trust, and a shared acknowledgement of how far they had all come together. Long after the barbecue ended, Rebecca and Olivia snuggled on the porch swing, gazing up at the stars. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree. Olivia yawned, her little head leaning against her mother's shoulder. "Mommy," she asked in a drowsy voice, "why do we live in this big house?" Rebecca smiled, planting a soft kiss on her daughter's curls. "Because it's ours, sweetheart. A special place that Grandpa and I fixed up so you can grow up safe and happy." Satisfied with the answer, Olivia soon drifted off to sleep. Rebecca remained, rocking gently, letting her thoughts wander. A bittersweet warmth enveloped her. The journey had been long and painful, but the destination was worth every tear. She held her daughter closer, inhaling the fresh night air. This was her life now, a life built on hard truths, unwavering love, and the undeniable strength that rose from the ashes of betrayal. And for Rebecca Martin Carter, that was more than enough. Standing victorious on the porch, where heartbreak once tried to take root, Rebecca found power in her resilience. She turned betrayal into lessons learned, forging a life filled with love, purpose, and unwavering hope for the future. Now she helps others discover their own hidden strengths, reminding them that a single piece of paper like a deed can symbolize not just property, but freedom from lies and a promise of better days. If Rebecca's journey moved you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Share this story with friends who need a powerful reminder that they too can overcome life's toughest battles. By hitting the subscribe button and turning on notifications, you'll be first to know when new inspiring stories and helpful advice videos drop. Your support makes it possible for us to keep shining light on journeys of resilience and hope. Together, let's keep writing our own chapters of victory.